Think of your marriage or your long-term relationship as a business. You are founding a business. You are starting a business together. Your marriage or your relationship is a third-party entity that exists between the two of you, that both of you are responsible equally for taking care of. It is not the feelings you feel for each other. That is not a relationship. That is fluff. There is a framework made of iron underneath your relationship that bonds the two of you together, something you're trying to achieve as a team. Whatever that outcome legacy might be, you're trying to achieve something as a couple. You have to define what that long-term goal is, and then you must partner on that long-term goal and do what is best for the long-term goal and the health of the relationship that's the vehicle getting you to that long-term goal. You can't solve problems on your own because it doesn't affect just you, it affects both of you. If in a business there was a problem, one person wouldn't just take care of it really fast and not tell the other person. If your relationship skills would bankrupt a business, it's going to bankrupt your relationship.
Adam, how are things?
Wonderful here. They're getting warm, and then it's going to plunge into ice cold temperatures. But apart from that, it's good.
I can empathise being north of the border in the UK, which for people south of the border is alien, cold, snowy country as it's often recognised. But nonetheless, let's dive straight into the real key question, the core of today, which is what is attachment?
Attachment is the way that we connect to other human beings to give and receive love. It is the mechanism by which we feel love, we experience love, we believe in love, and it changes us as we experience it or as we don't. And it comes from our parents. They're the ones who teach us if we're going to be loved or if we're going to be acted upon like objects.
It's as if you've given that answer before, Adam. That was very
Oh,
polished.
many times, many times. I coach this day in and day out, and I teach this everywhere. I stream everywhere about this. This is my heart and soul, is teaching people about attachment. So I've had to boil it down that tight.
So on that, it's not a very well documented, well studied portion of psychotherapy, of psychology as an academic discipline. So what was it that led you down this rabbit hole that didn't lead others? Was there something from a personal point of view, or was it just a gap that you saw that you wanted to explore? Talk us through how you got to where you are today, ultimately.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I grew up with attachment issues. I grew up with a generational family, multiple generations of dysfunction and struggle. I wouldn't point at any one person and say, oh, that person, but it was a whole family system of brokenness, not understanding, not doing the good things, not knowing the good things to do. And when you don't have those, when your parents avoided the bad, but they didn't know how to do the good, things like that, it leads to these generational attachment issues where you grow up thinking, I shouldn't be this unhappy. I shouldn't be this paranoid, this worried. Why am I always afraid of being abandoned? Why do I have to perform to make people happy? Why am I perfectionist? Why do I feel so empty on the inside? Why do I keep people out and run screaming when someone tries to get close to me? What is this about me? And I had that, and I wanted to understand why. And then I fixed it. I had to fix it. I met my wife. I was 22, and they said, we got to make this work because she's an amazing girl. And we managed to fix the attachment. We did it. We beat it. And I said, what the heck did we just fix? And what was this? And how did it even work? So I went to school. I got my master's degree in psychology, emphasis marriage and family therapy with systems focus. That took 6 years, then 3 years of apprenticeship under five different clinicians with 4 different licensure types, trying to become a therapist. That was 9 years. And then I spent years in the field as a psychotherapist, working with families, individuals, couples. And then from there, I started training other professionals and mental health professionals, trying to figure all this out. And what I uncovered was that there was this thing called attachment that in graduate school, that they had told us, yeah, this thing called attachment. Somebody studied it a long time ago. This person named Bowlby. Don't worry about attachment. It is only for little kids. And if you don't work with kids like 5 years and under, you don't need to know what attachment is because it will always become a violent or stealing or drug using kind of behavior in teenager years. And it will always become an extreme personality in adulthood. And apart from that, attachment doesn't matter. So don't even think about it. And when I learned about attachment, I had to read through these old books and 500-page tomes of knowledge to figure out what attachment was. That's why I boiled it down now into one sentence. And read peer-reviewed journal articles no one else wanted to bother reading. And I read all of these and said, this is it. They skipped over this in school, but this is it. This is this thing called attachment. Why is no one talking about this? And I said, I got to talk about this. I got to tell everybody about this. So I wrote a couple of books about it, really short books, designed to blast you through it very quickly. And I started handing them out to other clinicians and saying, have you heard about it? Have you heard the good news about attachment? And I would hand them this little book and they would read it. And they'd come back like, Adam, what did you discover here? And I'd say, I know. Think about this attachment. When you grow up this way and you don't think you deserve love and you have to perform and you're fearful and you're terrified all the time, doesn't that look like it would lead into generalized anxiety disorder? And then doesn't that look like when you hit your teenager years, wouldn't that hit maybe depression as you're miserable and you feel hopeless and social connections are even more important? Couldn't that be right? And couldn't that be leading to this wave of teenage depression? And if your fear got worse and you had bad experiences, couldn't that lead into panic attacks? And couldn't that lead into drug epidemics? And maybe if you're not getting these brain chemicals you're supposed to get, vasopressin, oxytocin, serotonin, GABA, all you have left is dopamine. Maybe that's why people are chasing dopamine binges with all these addictions. And what about this and this? And all the diagnoses started to make sense under this umbrella of broken attachment and how each person responds to it, even to the point of I had two specialties. One was attachment and one was severe trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I started looking at when you have attachment issues and you have a trauma, your brain says, what are all the factors that went into this and how do I make sure I stay safe? And when you have attachment issues, you believe no one will ever care for you. It lowers your threshold to get PTSD after trauma because your brain says, all I've been doing is worrying my whole life. All I can worry more. No, all I can do is worry more. No one's ever going to help me. I have to stay on guard. I will never be safe. And it makes it easier to get PTSD after a trauma event. All of the diagnoses started to make sense under this. So I started training other healthcare professionals. And they'd pull me into the clinic and say, all right, train these 30 or 40 people here, the doctors, nurses, med providers, testers, other therapists, train everybody in here about attachment. So I started talking about it online a little bit, and this agency called Veritas scooped me up and said, we want you to teach a billion people in the world about attachment. We want you to teach everyone. We don't care how long it takes you to get started. We will build you the platforms. Teach everybody that you can about this stuff. So here I am doing this podcast. I live stream, like I said, I coach it. This has become my life, is this thing that I fixed and had to go out and figure out what it even was. And here I am now teaching other people about it. You're right. They don't cover it in therapy school. They don't talk about it anywhere because no one knows about it yet. But we're changing that.
Slowly but surely, and again, it's something that I've taken on an enormous amount of value from listening to you talk about it. But why do you think it is that ultimately the attachment specific concerns have only been applied to the younger generation in general terms? Because is it just academic stubbornness? Is it this is the way we've done things? What do you think it is from a clinical setting that means that you're the one carrying the beacon?
Absolutely. There's two things. Number one is it goes back to Freud, the split between Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. Carl Jung believed that you changed across your lifespan and you were always asking and answering questions about yourself. But he had a dispute with Freud, and Freud was known for throwing people out of the psychology community if they slightly disagreed with him. And Freud believed everything was a pathological problem and that you had to treat specific problems with just talk therapy and it would go away, and that you hit stages, but you just kind of were locked into them for the rest of your life unless you kind of talked through them and fixed them slowly with all kinds of wild ideas. He really pioneered in many ways giving cocaine to children. He wrote all kinds of essays about how you need to be giving cocaine to children for just about every remedy that they could possibly need. He led the way in a lot of that over here in America, especially. So that is one major split. At the beginning of psychology as a movement over 100 years ago, we were looking at, okay, everything is this pathological problem and you're locked in and you're stuck and you're just going to stay this way, which is why so many people think when they hear about attachment, the first thing they think is, oh, I'm an anxious attachment style. I will be this way for the rest of my life. I just need to manage it like a disease. And that comes into the second problem of we have a very medical-based system in the West where psychology has fallen under the umbrella of healthcare, like a medical problem. So then when we go to school, they teach us the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual. It's this giant, thick book of all the diagnoses that you can get. And they teach us to the diagnoses that you are going to be looking for. And so the diagnoses are symptoms of outgrowths of these attachment issues, but they don't really train you into say, okay, here's the quality of life and quality of relationships of the system focus. Most of them are so focused on the diagnoses or the social problems. My license that I had was licensed in marriage and family therapist, and I had to give that up so I could coach internationally because they're restricted here in the U.S. If you want to be a therapist, you could be a therapist in one state, and that's it, and no coaching. And That focus, fortunately, was systemic. Of let's look at the actual system instead of saying what is wrong with the person and what can we diagnose them with and how can we give them a medication to fix it. So I looked at the whole system, and through all the apprenticeships and everything I did with multiple other people, I came in contact with a few, let's say, open-minded practitioners who said, you know what, Adam, if you're feeling like attachment might be the answer here, let's not worry so much about the diagnosis. Let's worry about treating the person. If you think the attachment thing is, why don't you treat them as if they were 5 years old? Look at some of the attachment things that are out there for 5-year-olds, tailor them up to an adulthood style, and let's see what that does, and let them know fully what you're going to do and that this is the approach. And it was amazing to see how that resonated with people. Instead of treating them like they had cancer in the brain, treating them like they had a system problem, that they had learned the wrong lessons and now we needed to teach them the right lessons. Oh man, did that resonate, especially with men. And men don't like to come to therapy, as you know.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but to summarize that understanding, it's almost going from teaching psychological understanding is almost like a car engine, where you go in and right, let's look at the whole and then see what parts we can replace, we can provide medication for, or this, that, and the other. Very objective. Whereas in reality, what we need to do is look at the systemic underpinning of all this, which is the human being,
Yes.
which is much more subjective, much less let's take a spark plug off the shelf and put it in there, and it's much more let's start from scratch and
Yes.
build from the bottom up. Is that a fair way of summarizing it?
Absolutely. Attachment, it comes down to, are you going to be acted with cooperatively by other people in good faith? Or are you going to be acted upon by other people who will not act in good faith, either because something's wrong with you or something's wrong with them? And that's a fundamental belief of the universe. Water is wet, gravity pulls things down, and I'm an unlovable piece of crap that no one will ever work with me, so I have to survive. It's a law of the universe we don't question. And then you go into your therapist and they treat everything else, but they don't really look at that underlying thought.
So with that in mind, given your experience in the clinical setting, given your experience as a coach worldwide, streaming, everything that you do now, what are the general misunderstandings that we have around attachment in the Western world?
Number one is that it can't be fixed. People think, oh, my attachment style is set in stone. I am an anxious attachment style. I will always be anxious attachment style. And when I tell them you can fix this, you don't have to live this way. You can alter the way that you even think about yourself and your relationships forever. It blows their mind. And people with anxious attachment style who think they're the problem are happy to learn that. People with avoidant style who are fearful of other human beings are very skeptical, and it takes them a while to really come out of their shell and even believe it. So that's the biggest misconception that I see, is that this is not set in stone, guys. You can change this. It just takes some steps and some experiences, and you just have someone guide you through it, and it's good.
Just because I know that we'll come back to those terms, do you want to just unpack a little bit more around the anxious and the two elements of attachment styles that are worth unpacking?
Absolutely.
So that we can place ourselves within them from our understanding and then take more from this as a
Absolutely. I'll
listener?
do this real fast. There's 4 attachment styles. Number 1 is secure, which you believe other people will act in good faith. They will love you. They will cooperate with you. Your anxieties are usually very low because you don't have to worry about what other people are going to do and say. You just live your life based on right and wrong. And as your understanding of it, your principles, your goals, and stress is very low. And you work with other people openly and calmly, and you don't have to hide. Anxious style is the opposite. You believe you are garbage and no one can ever love you, so you have to earn approval from other people. You're constantly afraid of abandonment, and even perceived abandonment brings terror and pain of death. So you run screaming from it, but you earn approval from other people. We got a lot of codependency this way. I'm going to earn approval from people so that they can never leave me because they need me. They need to be needed. And there's avoidance style, and there's different sections of avoidant. Some are narcissistic and really hurtful, and they manipulate other people and push their buttons and then do nice things. They love bomb in the beginning, and they say, oh, you're so great and wonderful, and saturate you with oxytocin. And then they start pulling away and controlling and gaslighting and hurting to try to control you. You're an object in their eyes is what it is, in their brain. They process you as an object. Or there's fearful avoidant, of just, I am so afraid I need to stay away from other people because I cannot trust them. I will be over here. Life feels kind of empty, but I don't think I can ever get close to people. Then there's a blending of the two, the disorganized style, also now called anxious avoidant style, where you are so used to being acted upon and hurt that you then sometimes, when you're pressed into a corner, you flip around and start acting upon other people. You might hurt them, you might manipulate them, you might run screaming. It's very chaotic. Those are the 4 attachment styles. And yes, those last 3 can all be fixed and you can become secure.
How hard and fast are the parameters on this? Because my understanding of this from your perspective is it's all within a human sphere. But from my understanding of reflecting upon myself and the conversations I've had, can these things be applied to career goals, financial parameters, to location? For example, somebody that feels secure in never leaving the small town they've grown up in rural America, for example. I know that's a bit of a trope that's been done to death, but are these attachment... Would you say that the decision making is a reflection of our attachment style, or the attachment style can go beyond just human to human interaction?
The attachment style covers everything in life. Everything is a relationship. Everything is a relationship. Your work is based on relationships with colleagues, with customers. Even if you're an artist, it's based on your relationship to your audience. Your work is your friendships, your family, your romance, where you live, what you eat, how you take care of yourself, what you believe about yourself, your finances, how you spend. If you have broken attachment, you don't connect to people, you won't get vasopressin bonding from solving problems with people because you'll be all alone. And you'll think you have to solve everything alone. You won't get oxytocin bonding from warmth and care and nurturing. So those things feel really weird and uncomfortable and fearful for you. You don't get serotonin because that releases, you might get some, but you won't get much because it releases during good conversations, warmth, bonding, feeling secure with people. And then you won't get much GABA, which releases when you have a lot of oxytocin in your system. And GABA suppresses depression feelings and anxiety feelings. And when you don't get any of those, then what do you have left? Well, you can punch the dopamine button as often as possible, which is why people dive into sugar, gambling, pornography, video game addiction, many different substance and drug addictions. All kinds of addictions can feed back into this addiction. So this attachment cycle. And it touches every single part of your life. It's the foundation.
Fascinating, fascinating. I'm sure at this point there's people like myself who are reflecting on, which category do I fall in? And then did I make that decision because of this? And they're working backwards. Yes. But just for some more context, we had a neuroscientist from over here in the UK, TJ Power, on, who gave us a really, really good overview of the neuroscience within the context that he speaks about openly, which is his dose. So dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. So anyone listening should be quite well informed on the mechanisms behind all of those things. But you talk a lot about the relationship between vasopressin and oxytocin. So from a practical side of things, what's the difference? And from an understanding side of things, how do we use that
Absolutely.
information?
So oxytocin is warmth, care, nurturing. It's when your mom gives you a hug. It's when you high five. It's when you pat your buddy on the back. It's when you snuggle with your sweetheart under a blanket. When you have a good conversation, you get accepted. Oxytocin is the hormone release that bonds you to the other person in an absence of stress. It's when there is no stress, you bond to them because it's so warm and caring. Vasopressin is when there is stress and the two of you resolve it together. So this could be in the military, right? A unit storming a hill and taking that hill together. This is why military buddies stay buddies for life, even if they didn't like each other at the start. It is overcoming challenges together. It is going through hell together and coming out the other side. It could be putting together a piece of furniture, an IKEA bookshelf, or if you survive the experience together. It could be as simple as going to a shooting range and teaching each other a skill, or taking a class together. Going through a new experience that stress bonds you to each other by solving it together is vasopressin. And your brain needs to understand you can cooperate with other people to really get that vasopressin. It's absolutely crucial. Men also, by the way, have more vasopressin receptors than women do. And if you have a difficult childhood, your brain, where you don't get much oxytocin, your brain will shift your oxytocin receptors to instead function as vasopressin receptors. So you will be even more loaded into vasopressin.
What's interesting there is the first thing that jumped out to me is I'm currently spinning a lot of plates, and to be honest, I have not prioritized social interaction as much as I should. And day to day, I occasionally feel the ramifications of that, and it's something I want to improve. But with what you've just said there, it's made me think that maybe with my male friends, I should endeavour to do things that are more challenging and more out of the box, because it will actually form stronger bonds, stronger connection. And if I'm going to be strangely Western world and almost applying economic theory to this, I'll get more bang for my buck with the social interaction in terms of what's actually netted, because I'm thinking back to the people I have the strongest connections with, and generally it's those that have been a part of the big endurance events I've been a part of, because there's a process, there's a planning, there's a shared suffering, there's a how do we get over this speed bump that's been put in front of us, and those are the strongest bonds I currently have in my life. So we might have created a life hack whereby if you are struggling for time with your male friends in a social setting, go and play Scrabble or do something that's a little bit more problem oriented, because it will form stronger bonds through the mechanism of
Yes, that's what
vasopressin.
men are built to do. We are designed by nature to do that. So if we lean into that, we will definitely get more bang for the buck.
Very good to know. I'll make some calls after this podcast and restructure my social setting. But it's very fascinating to understand these things, because I think the more we can empower ourselves with knowledge around our neuroscience, things make more sense on a day-to-day basis, don't they? So with that in mind, from a relationships point of view, from a conventional relationships point of view, your background in couples marriage counselling, there's a lot of white noise in the Western world. There's a lot of things that we need to process. There's a lot of things being fed to us that are difficult to comprehend. So what were the general things that you noticed from a relationship point of view between males and females, or same-sex marriages or same-sex relationships that were clearly defined within the parameters in which you assign to attachment? So if you place a secure person alongside an anxious attachment person, what does that equal?
Absolutely.
That sort of equation.
To dive into this, let me dive into a real quick topic about men and women and some brief differences. I spoke at depth in this on my attachment bootcamp course on my website, adamlanesmith.com. But there's two different ways that men and women really bond, especially at the beginning of a relationship. And they are each trying to bond the other one to them in that way. And it just doesn't work in the Western world. Women try to bond men to them using oxytocin, which is why women will jump into bed fairly quickly. Many women here in the Western world will, I should say, hoping that if they have really good bedroom experiences, it will bond the men to them the way a woman would bond, getting oxytocin release. It would make them feel closer. And those women are often very disappointed when those men don't develop emotional romantic feelings for them. They develop dopamine bonds more toward those women, and the men view them as like, hey, that was a really nice hamburger to eat. Now I'm not hungry, so I'm going to go play Xbox. I'll come back when I'm hungry again, instead of I am in love with this woman. Men bond first through vasopressin is how we really bond the best. So bonding through solving problems together, overcoming challenges together. This is how men really bond first, and then we want to emotionally invest with oxytocin bonding second, because now we can afford the time to invest in somebody that we want to keep around. Our brain says this person's a trusted ally and a great asset. Let me keep them in my life by bonding through oxytocin. Women tend to be the opposite. They want to oxytocin bond first through warmth and care and lack of stress. And then once they've established that they can trust you not to abandon them in the middle of a challenge, then they will vasopressin bond with you and go through experiences with you and challenges. We're two ships passing in the night. Now, when you track this onto avoidant attachment and anxious attachment will come in, and women often have anxious attachment more than men do. Women will come in eager for approval. And at the same time, that means to them oxytocin bonding. So they come in oxytocin bonding, trying to be useful to him. And the best way that they know here in the Western world is through bedroom and fun experience and making him feel good and making him feel like he has her attention. And men just don't really connect much that way. Men come in, especially men who have a lot more avoidant attachment styles, and they don't solve problems with other people. In fact, they keep other people at arm's length and say, no, I'm not interested in opening up and connecting my vulnerabilities here. I don't want to show you who I am. I'm me. I have my problems. You have yours. Stay over there and solve them yourself. And women take on so much emotional intimacy through sharing of problems and sharing of concerns, not even solving them, but bonding over them and sharing them and being vulnerable, that when men with avoidant issues don't do this, after the first 6 to 12 months of the relationship, the female drive shifts from short-term gain to long-term maintenance and stability. And her brain says, okay, he is not emotionally bonding with me. If I happen to get pregnant, he will abandon me and my child. So I'm going to crank the sex drive way down because I'm not getting much oxytocin bonding. And he has no idea what has happened. And neither does she, really. They start struggling at 6 to 12 months. And this is where a lot of couples, when they have that dynamic, they start struggling really bad. It gets worse if and when they have kids together, because she shifts again and has more oxytocin, and he has no idea what's going on. So then she views him as a threat to the kids because he's not bonding to them, and the kids are now picking up anxious attachment problems from him, and she blames him. All of this is the male-female dynamic here in the West, and it's built on our differences, but it's also built on the way that these attachment issues are making our differences a liability instead of a benefit.
So what are the low-hanging fruits that you work with people on to try and begin to repair these? Because it sounds like it's quite systemic and embedded within society. It's not as if anyone's at blame here for what these things are, because it could be framed as as one person's decision is ignorant of the other person's needs or requirements, which is often something that is spoken about in media terms, I guess. I think you could probably go open a Cosmopolitan and see those phrases used in that setting. But what is the process for somebody beginning to, one, understand, and then two, repair that so that you can actually cultivate a happier, healthier
Absolutely.
relationship?
So not easiest, the first step that I always give people is you got to work on your anxiety levels enough to be able to face some of these fears, because these are built in from childhood. Like first hour of life up to the first 12 years of life, your brain is learning if people will love you or not. That, like, the moment you are born, does mom love me? Do I get physical contact? Do I get care and nurturing? Was I put in the NICU, over here, the intensive care unit for babies, and put in there for 3 weeks and crying with little physical contact? Was I put in daycare way early and with strangers and had to compete with other kids for attention? Did my parents come home exhausted? They spend time with me. Breastfeeding goes into this. That's a huge oxytocin thing, and bonding. Over here in America, especially, we've had this huge push toward formula, and now we're seeing all these kids with attachment issues all of a sudden. Formula and early daycare. And then parental depression, parental anxiety, parental attachment issues, divorce, splitting up marriages, people not even getting married, and all kinds of problems over here has led to this massive rise. And the way to fix that is to go through the fear of, this has been a problem in my brain since before I could even form thoughts. I am irrationally terrified of being rejected or abandoned or hurt. So I think I'm going to die if I open myself up to another human being. So step 0, learn to manage the anxiety enough to then open up to one human being and explain the thoughts and feelings that you're having and what these irrational fears are, and say what I call I am an anxious person speech. You may not know this about me, but I'm an anxious person. I try to stay safe from rejection or hurt in relationships. And it makes me do things and say things that maybe I don't mean, or I run away, or I try to people please, and I hate it, and I don't ever want to do it again. Can we please have an honest relationship, you and me, for the rest of our lives together? And this is the most terrifying conversation a person will have throughout their life, because it's very terrifying. And they're opening up for the first time, and the other person almost always says, yes, that sounds great. I didn't really know it was that bad, but I knew you had some anxiety. Let's work on this. Great. Yeah, let's be friends. And it's this rush of brain chemicals you were supposed to be getting for the last 20, 30 years of your life. And you experience tremendous relief and changes. And people come back into coaching sessions with me after that and say, Adam, I don't even know how to describe this feeling. Is this really how it feels just to be loved? And I say, dude, you've only had one conversation. This is only the beginning. And then you go back out and you test it again, and you test it, and you lean into your relationships. And every time you're honest, you'll be terrified. Then you'll receive that reassurance and acceptance, and it heals you again and again and again. And you need someone to walk with you through this process, which is why I do coaching, and I have a whole group, the Attachment Circle, built on helping people through this. But it's you need somebody to guide you through it, because it feels so terrifying, and at times you want to stop. But this is how you heal, is by experiencing that love and challenging all the fears that you've held all those years.
But step 1, as it is with many things, is honesty, isn't it? It's honesty with yourself. And having that conversation, whether it's in the mirror, whether it's in a journal, whether it's as you walk in the dog or out on a run, whatever it might be, confronting that reality over and over and over and over again until you're comfortable enough to actually externalize that. And then once it's out there, I've experienced this myself with depression. I often talk about when I was out walking the dog that I got when I just came out of my suicide attempt. I said something like, "We're going to be okay, aren't we, Pig?" The dog's called Pig. His government name is Odie, but he snores so much we call him Pig. And as I said it, I almost reached out to grab it and put it back down my throat, because the fear was there in terms of, oh, I've said it, it's out in the world, I'm exposed. But then, slowly but surely, that was step 1 of step 2 of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I'll happily meet Barry from down the pub that I've known for 15 seconds and is 5 generations my senior and say, hello, Barry, I suffered with depression for 2 years. I'm probably volatile and subject to it again in the future, and attempted suicide in 2016. Do you want another pint? And that's only come through reps. It's doing the reps over time. So with that in mind, given that there's so much crossover between ultimately the root of all of our human anxiousness, lack of fulfillment, problems, challenges, however you want to phrase it, it seems that honesty and acknowledgement of who we truly are is phase 1 of really opening up that can of worm. So from your understanding within this sphere, I know you've got some clear opinions on the differences between male and female depression in the Western world. what is your understanding of ultimately the cause of the depression epidemic that we're experiencing in the Western world, and why men suffer more with it? Because the statistics are about 75%, 25% in terms of how badly that can manifest with the suicide statistics. I'm not saying that men are more
No,
susceptible to these
suicide.
feelings, but the repression of these feelings,
Yeah, the
we
male
absolutely
suicide
are.
rate in the West is just that is a real epidemic, and nobody is talking about it. It's just like, well, we'll sweep this under the rug, and it is staggering. Here in the West, we have tremendous depression. In the United States, especially, they say that 1 in 4 women is on an antidepressant here in the United States now. 1 in 4, and that does not sound natural. People ask me all the time, isn't depression something that you just chemically have and you just need a medication? And I say, well, I don't know of any species on Earth then, except humans, that they had to wait millions of years to evolve the ability to build a drug that would solve a chemical problem in their brain that makes them want to kill themselves. I don't know any other species on Earth. Is there a dolphin maybe, or a parrot? No, just humans. Okay, well, maybe then that doesn't make sense for us to have that. Maybe there's something we're not seeing. And this rise in the belief that we are unlovable and can never receive connection with other human beings drives us up the wall with fear and terror. And eventually we start looking for a way out. Suicide isn't about, I wish I was dead. Suicide is about, I wish the pain would end and there's no other way to do it and I can't live with this anymore. So I am out.
It's exactly how I phrase it. It's
Yes.
peace I was looking for. I never
No.
acknowledged I would like to die. I acknowledged
Yes.
I would like some peace, which is what's really quite terrifying for me to look back on now, because I did such a good job
Yes.
of disguising reality because of
Yes.
the
And
irrational state of
peace
mind I was in.
peace comes from having a brain full of the right healthy chemicals. Vasopressin, that tells you you have trusted allies who will solve problems with you. Oxytocin, which tells you that people genuinely love and care about you and you are not alone even if you get hurt. GABA, which allows you to suppress those painful thoughts and feelings anyway so that you don't feel them as intensely. Serotonin, which allows you to feel positively and warm and have an elevated mood. And then a little bit of dopamine sprinkled in so that you have some good positive feelings. That is the cocktail for peace when you have any struggles at all in life, because your brain brings all of those things in and says, I don't need to be afraid. I have a tribe, a village, a family of people who will take care of me no matter what happens and will help me solve problems. So it turns the volume down on all the other problems. And when you don't have that because you have attachment issues, your brain says, I have no one. I am alone. I am afraid. And all I can do is worry and be terrified 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, have insomnia, have eating issues, overeating issues, binging on things, on dopamine, just so I stay alert through my constant cortisol and stress flood. And that's all I can do. And that crashes into depression because eventually you can't keep up that endless wave of fear. Eventually bad things happen anyway. And then you feel totally alone and you're getting bad brain chemicals. And if you just want to talk about the chemicals alone, low serotonin from bad relationships, what is that correlated with? Well, often low serotonin is correlated with depression episodes. And that crashes you right into it. So when you have healthy attachment, it is so much easier to push off those negative feelings. I have I don't know that I've ever worked with a case through my years of licensed psychotherapy or my coaching now where somebody had depression and had great attachment. Grief, yes, grief can be a specific thing, complicated grief even, but full on just depression and major depression and coming and going and multiple depression episodes and suicide attempts with real attachment. I don't know that I've ever seen that. I don't know that I've ever seen that. So here in the West, all of that depression really crashes in on that attachment. And then you think about these two different pieces. You asked me male and female depression. Male depression so often is based on the belief that either we have no purpose, no mission in life, so there's no point in us being alive, or number two, that we are absolutely helpless to achieve that mission in any way, shape, or form. We are just completely helpless and stuck. And those really boil down to, what is your purpose in life? What is your mission? Well, it's probably based on relationships. And where does your power and leverage come from? Well, it's really the strength of your relationships and the people you can learn skills from and getting solutions from other people who face the challenges that you're trying to face, and other men and data and information. Well, where does that come from? Relationships and attachment. When you have broken attachment, you as a man eventually will get stuck and you will hate your life and you will think there's no way out and you will start looking for a way out. And the way out is not to connect to other people at that point. There is just no way out except to die so the pain ends.
With that in mind, what are the strategies and things that you would implement for men to better support other men? Because if we're all inherently avoidant due to the attachment issues that are almost systemically bred into us, how can we, beyond encouraging and cultivating a more honest and open society, which sounds a bit blue sky thinking when you put it that way, but one conversation can have a powerful impact for the individual and for the person next to them. But how can we accelerate the snowball? What are the strategies that you would recommend from a psychotherapy point of view that will help men
number
better
one,
help
first
men?
thing that rings a bell right off the top of my head is you saying you can go down to the pub and open up and let people know what challenges you've been through. So men like you who are just that open and are talking about it, that in itself, other men hear that and say, wow, I can't believe he just said that, and everyone accepted him. The fear is that if you open up and share anything, nobody will accept you, and you will be excluded and alone and either abandoned or hurt, and you can never really be accepted by other human beings. So watching another person receive acceptance in itself is a tremendous lesson. So modeling that for other men and then inviting them into that healthier life and saying, hey, you know what? Here's been my challenges. If you have anything you're going through, let me know and we can talk it through. And let's just be buds. And just saying that. Number two is getting weird. I tell guys, get weird. When you see your buddy going through something and he's kind of like, he's getting twitchy, he's going into the stress cave where we all go into, he's getting down the rabbit hole and he doesn't really want to talk about it. Just a simple, hey, bud, you know, it looks like something's going on. Not trying to scare you, like, you know, I'm looking at you or anything, but it looks like something's going on. If you ever want to talk about it, I am happy to talk about it because you are my friend and I want to be here for you. And being that blunt and that clear about it and saying you are my friend and I want to hear about it and letting them know they're not a burden, that's also inviting them in. The best thing you can do for men is open the door and invite and be explicit and be a little weird about it because they will. They'll go, oh, thanks, man. But you know what? 3 weeks later, they might come back and say, hey, you know what? You asked me if I was okay and you said I could share with you. Is it still okay if I share something? You're like, yeah, of course. Absolutely. And then you have to reassure a little bit. I'd love to hear it. Whatever you're going to tell me, man, I'm not going to judge you for it. Just kind of want to hear it and I'll be here for you. Whatever I can do, let me know. Okay, well, and then they'll share. But men, did you know, here's a big statistic that most people don't even realize. A lot of men, old men especially, they do not die in the hospital while other people are gathered around their bedside. They die when everybody leaves the room for a moment. A lot of men tend to die when people leave the room because men don't want to die even in front of people. They don't want to even let go. So when you're old and sick, dying is weak. A lot of men die alone, almost seemingly on purpose in those places where they let go when there's nobody there, but not when the people are right around them. And that's, if you invite a man into it and say, dude, you do what you've got to do. I've got your back. I've got your back. There's an Icelandic proverb, bear is the back of a brotherless man. And that's true. If you say, man, I've got your back, let me know what you've got, and let's work through it together as a team. Remember those vasopressin receptors, we're primed for that. And it's up to him then if he can choose to accept that you will accept him or not. But if you tell him that, man, you and I are a team, whatever you've got going on, let's get through it together. He might cry on the spot, but that kind of language is powerful for us men. We need that.
Very, very. And one thing I'm gonna add from a observational point of view, based on the conversation we've had thus far, is because I get asked a lot, how can I better support my friends? How can I better support my teenage boys, my colleagues, whatever it might be? I think we have a tendency when it comes to mental health, depression, anxiety specifically, to default to oxytocin biased behavior patterns. So we mollycoddle the person, we try and make them feel warm, comfortable, and all these things. When in reality, if you say to a man, look, here's a problem we can solve together, I'm here by your side, and then you get a little bit weird about how you present the solution, you present the problem to them so that you can together find the solution. I think that's a good way of reframing, actually, how can we better support men, is give them a problem to solve, but most importantly, solve it with them. And that will form stronger bonds, and actually, because the oxytocin stuff, it pushes us further away, doesn't it? If you're a man who's worried about being perceived as weak and vulnerable, and then you're presented with things that you define as weak and vulnerable, you're only going to push that person's offer of support further away. So very fascinating for me to take that away from a vasopressin point of view, that the more proactive with providing a further problem for the man to solve, that may actually inversely present a solution to a much bigger challenge.
When men go for help, they want solutions and they want to fix it. And when you go into therapy, many therapy models are, like you said, are built on oxygen. It's built on warmth and care, making men feel good about themselves. Men don't feel good about themselves until they're solving a problem. Men want solutions and answers and power. Men want to feel powerful in their own life. And therapy, as much as it talks about empowerment, it's emotional empowerment rather than practical empowerment very often. So it's one reason I coach now, is coaching is about actual practical empowerment. Here's what you need to do. Here's the steps. Go do this. Take this plan. Here's the next 3 days laid out for you. Go follow these steps and it'll change your life. Just do it. Shut up. Go do it kind of thing. Then they shut up and they go do it and they come back like shell-shocked and they want more because it feels so good for us men when we accomplish, especially when we accomplish as a team with somebody else and we can high-five them for it.
And don't get lost doing it on your own, as it's quite easy to do sometimes, because that can actually send us the other direction. As every once in a while recently, I felt like I'm charging down that corridor and occasionally need to about turn and get back to the fork in the road.
Absolutely. We all need accountability people to check in with us. If I go, we all do, and we all do. I'm an attachment specialist, former therapist, now a coach, and even I get down the rabbit hole with stress sometimes, and I kind of dip back in. I'm getting into my head, and a couple of weeks will go by, and then all of a sudden I'll have all these people in my life flood in and say, all right, Adam, it's been 2-3 weeks since we heard from you. What is going on? They kick down my door. They parachute in through the ceiling. And all these people flood me and say, all right, you're going to open up and talk to us whether you like it or not. And I say, darn it. Okay. And then you have to open up and share the sad feelings and the vulnerabilities. And they laugh at you like, why did you even hide this from us? And then, all right, guys, you got me. All right, what are we going to do when we get through it? And then you vast suppress and bond all as a team as you've all got through it. And you do that with each other. And then I've got buddies that I do that with. And we cycle around and we all that's the power of tribe. That's the power of community. That's the power of family. That's what humans are supposed to be. And when we have attachment issues, it breaks us out of that. And when you're alone, you don't do well. Fix the attachment.
So going back to the broader concept of fixing the attachment, I'm conscious that for some listening that might feel they might feel somewhat attacked at this stage, in the sense that they feel exposed and seen, which is a good thing because it'll force that honest reflection that we've discussed. But one thing I want to circle back to is, you mentioned the first 3 weeks, if a child's in an incubator or an ICU unit, that really sets a precedent of detachment that then will manifest itself in one way or another later in life. So from that perspective, the pandemic, given that parents have been at the house more, yes, but the parents have been at the house more and less present whilst in the house. What is your overarching view on the longer term impact on the younger generation currently that have lived through the pandemic in a home setting rather than the setting they were expected to, if that makes sense?
There's this, I don't want to call it secret, but there is an unpublished, I should say, an unannounced epidemic over here in the United States of 10 and 11-year-olds committing suicide. And pediatricians over here in the United States have been sounding the alarm about 10 and 11-year-old age ranges. There's the skyrocketing suicide feelings happening in that group, and little kids over here in the U.S. Committing suicide on Zoom calls with their classes and things like that. That has happened over here in the United States a couple of times. It is overwhelming to be this isolated when you already probably had attachment issues in your family generationally. Your parents didn't know how to bond with you and connect with you very well, but now you're all trapped together alone in a home. You can't go out. You can't get disconnected. You can't connect to other people. You can't connect to other peers. You can't find that one in 50 kids that you connect with and build a loving relationship with and be best friends. You can't really get those things. So all you do is stay isolated in your home with your eyes glued to a screen, just dopamine binging all day, every day. And that's all you do. And that is your whole childhood. And now we're opening up a lot more, but things are not back to the way they were at all. And people have come out of this after several years now, reshaped and restructured. Relationships have changed, and even how we think about relationships has changed. We are so much deeper into binging than we even were before. It is not going well for many people. For many kids, it is just not doing well at all. They need so much more connection and so much more attachment and bonding and warmth. And it needs to happen on purpose. Parents need to be taking the lead in learning about attachment and bonding with their children on purpose, and vasopressin bonding, especially with their children on purpose, so their children know that they can connect with people and solve problems instead of feeling all alone. Parents must take the lead on this, because we're heading into a bad zone, and it's going to get worse.
So practically speaking, what does that look like? What does actually grabbing this problem by the neck and chucking out the door actually look like? Is it creating clearer boundaries around the household? Because I'm obviously not between the ages of 8 to 12, but for me, the pandemic has really blurred the boundaries between activities, tasks in and around the household and things, whereby I'm
Yeah.
kind of in an always on mentality, and I still am post pandemic. And I've kind of always been like that. But as a child, going to school, coming home from
Mm-hmm.
school, going to work, coming home from work, everybody in the
Mm-hmm.
household has a clear defining moment in their day where
Mm-hmm.
they down
Mm-hmm.
tools and they can be present. Whereas actually, the sort of false dichotomy of you get to spend more time around your
Ideally.
parents, which should in theory increase attachment, but in reality, the level of attachment day to day is
Yes.
so diluted due to that lack of boundaries that it's actually gone the other way. So for parents listening, or for those that would like to pass on a practical message for those to really try and alleviate some of the challenges that we've all faced over the past couple of years, what are the practical things? Is it creating more boundaries? Is it learning in new ways? Is it exploring new activities? What can people actually tangibly do tomorrow that will help here?
Two things. So, number one, yes, I like the associations, is what you're talking about. We need clear distinctions between different pieces of our day. We do need that so that it breaks up the monotony of it's just one long, continuous nothing. So I get up. I have my early morning outfit that I put on, that I relax and lounge in, and then I have a work outfit that I get into when I do my work. And at the end of the day, I change back into maybe an evening outfit, and it's very right, very Victorian and maybe Edwardian in that way. I don't have a dressing gown or anything like that, but you do have to make these distinctions in your outfits. If you are in simply the same clothes day and night, day and night, day and night, that will destroy you. So you need to have clear distinctions, and even workstations. I have a work area where I only work at. I don't play in that area, and I don't work. I don't work in my play areas, and I don't work in my resting areas. And I have clear areas in my house that are association built, and that's it. And my children know those zones as well, and they have their own designated zones for things like that, and it's very clear and distinct, without being draconian. And that is number one, is build in powerful associations so that you differentiate your uniforms based on and spaces based on what you are doing in those spaces at that time. Differentiate. Yes, that is good. That is good for all of us. But number two is learning about this attachment and being able to ask your kids key questions to uncover what answers might be there of, hey, I love you, but do you understand that I love you? Do you perceive that? Do you ever worry that there might be something wrong with you? Do you ever worry that people might not like you? Do you ever worry there's something unacceptable about yourself? Do you ever worry about these things? And these can sound like really up in your face questions, but it helps if you can share first anything you have felt as a person about attachment and how you maybe have overcome it, and then open up the door to say, this is how I felt, and this is maybe how I fixed it. Is this anything that you are feeling? Because if it is, this can get better and we can talk about it. And I'm here to work on this with you. And that right there is a crucial step of sharing first and then asking key questions about attachment to figure out where your child is at. And hopefully just open up the door. And even if they say no, then they've learned something about you and they can think about it. So if they ever do go through those pieces, you've opened the door for emotional vulnerability and they can come back and have those conversations. The goal is not to be a perfect parent. You can never be a perfect parent. I'm not a perfect parent. You're going to make mistakes. You're just going to make mistakes. The goal of parenting is to build a self-correcting system wherein when a problem arises, the child knows that they can come to you and solve the problem with you, and they can bring it up to you. And then as they become adults, they can solve the problems with each other, with their siblings. They can bring problems to you and with the solutions ready, and you can solve them as a team. Self-correcting family systems are the answer, not a perfect family system.
Again, it comes down to honesty. The thread of DNA that runs through all of this is honesty with yourself first and foremost, and then honesty with those around you, which is easier said than done. But I think, those tough conversations with yourself in the mirror, in a journal, in your iPhone notes, whatever it might be, I think they're very, very useful exercises. So to go in a different direction, something I know you've spoken about before that is becoming ever present in terms of media commentary, discussion, the recent surge in OnlyFans popularity. How much of that is a reflection of the attachment issues that you've discussed today and have spent years unpacking?
I will say this. I've treated a tremendous number of men for porn addiction. I have worked with all kinds of couples where the man cannot stop. Yes, men are primed to like to see naked women. Yes, there is that feature. But men who will spend exorbitant amounts of money paying models for a pseudo girlfriend experience, OnlyFans is a very specific entity that I tell people is built on a model of men who need to feel like a provider and who need customized information and details and almost get that fake girlfriend and feel almost intimacy through the experience. That is a whole other level than just opening up a tab and looking at pornography. That is totally different. And the girls who are there, who are using that as leverage and gaining that control over those men and feeling that kind of connection and that surge, that's what they're doing. They're provoking false intimacy and oxytocin and false and serotonin and dopamine. It's a whole flood of things that is more than just a dopamine binge. Just a dopamine binge would be one thing, but getting guys to pound out $1,000 in support and just laughing and saying, "Oh, hey, thanks for it," that is a whole other level. And attachment feeds into the rise of OnlyFans like gasoline feeds into a fire, man. It is what it is. You need to be aware of the attachment pieces that are going on under the surface. And that's true of any pornography addiction, whether it's OnlyFans or the guy who is married but secretly masturbates in the bathroom, every other day or so, and doesn't want his wife to find out, or the wives who are struggling to explain to their husband why it is such a problem that he is sneaking off to look at Instagram models on his phone and the girls are wearing bikinis and stuff like that. It really comes back to, I don't connect to other human beings, so I view other people as objects without meaning to and without understanding it. And I don't hurt them, but I get pleasure from them. And then you take all that back into the bedroom with your girlfriend or your wife, and you treat her like an object in the same way. And you start binging experiences and body parts rather than bonding with her as a human being. This is why so many guys who have pornography addictions, they are terrible in the bedroom, but they think they're amazing because they aren't bonding with her. He almost forgets she's in the room. He's just focused on body parts and acts that they are performing together. And that is what he has learned to fetishize is that. And she feels so emotionally disconnected. And that's why so many women are so sexually unsatisfied in their most intimate relationships, is because, number one, their attachment issues might be stopping them from opening up and connecting. But also, number two, so many guys with these porn things are just, they don't even know how to be emotionally intimate anymore.
So where's the breakdown there? Is that from a internal perspective, from a masculine point of view, or from a failure to communicate? I guess they're somewhat intertwined, aren't they? Because ultimately the lack of internal understanding prevents the lack of external communication. But how could, I mean, if we dilute this back down to a couple that is in a situation where they feel like they're struggling to be entirely honest with one another about whatever it might be, whether it's finances, whether it's, the examples you've given, somebody's spending thousands of pounds a month on OnlyFans subscriptions, whether it's somebody's gone and bought a dog behind somebody's back, or they're working on things that they're not sharing. What are the strategies people can implement to try and cultivate a more harmonious, communicative relationship? Because I think there's a bit of a tendency through, whether it's throwaway culture, fast fashion, Amazon Prime, you'll get this delivered this afternoon now. It's not even tomorrow, it's this afternoon, of throwaway culture that goes with this, whereby as soon as people hit a hurdle in the relationship, game over, on to the next one. I think that's something that is deeply troubling to me from an existential point of view, because I'm in a very happy, loving relationship and struggle to process how it could be otherwise, because we've got to the point where we're very honest and open. But for anyone that's sitting in the situation where they wouldn't know how to communicate that they want to better communicate, what are the strategies that you would implement when you were working from a couples counselling point of view, and more importantly now from a attachment point of view with the coaching services?
Yep. So as as a licensed marriage and family therapist back in the day, and now with my attachment bootcamp course, module 10, step 10 of that program talks about building a partnership mentality in the relationship. When you fix your attachment, you are able to partner with the other person instead of being two individuals. So I tell people this: think of your marriage or your long-term relationship as a business. You are founding a business. You are starting a business together. Your marriage or your relationship is a third-party entity that exists between the two of you, that both of you are responsible equally for taking care of. It is not the feelings you feel for each other. That is not a relationship. That is fluff. There is a framework made of iron underneath your relationship that bonds the two of you together, something you're trying to achieve as a team. Whatever that outcome legacy might be, you're trying to achieve something as a couple. You have to define what that long-term goal is, and then you must partner on that long-term goal and do what is best for the long-term goal and the health of the relationship that's the vehicle getting you to that long-term goal. So if that long-term goal is rocking chairs, age of 90 years old on your front porch, you're pinching each other's butts and you're watching your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids play, soccer or football on the front lawn, then you're there and you're old and happy together. If that's your legacy that you want to get to, then you need to work as a partnership and communicate about problems. You can't solve problems on your own because it doesn't affect just you, it affects both of you. If in a business there was a problem, one person wouldn't just take care of it really fast and not tell the other person. You would say, hey, just so you know, there's this problem. Here's what I'm thinking about doing with it. Is this a good idea? Can we do this together? Yes, let's do that. Take care of it. That's how you would run a business. If your relationship skills would bankrupt a business, it's going to bankrupt your relationship.
So to close off, what is the most powerful thing listeners can do from the end of this conversation to begin to confront their own attachment issues?
Good question. Number one is to even start believing that attachment is real. And that's why I get on and do these podcasts, is just so that somebody out there will say, is this real? Is that true? Are my problems based on attachment? And if so, can I really change it? Number one, even believe it's possible. Number two, start learning all about attachment. And I've got a ton of resources. Go on adamlanesmith.com. I've got a ton of resources on there for you. My course, my coaching. I've got a book, Slaying Your Fears, available on Amazon on just about every continent now. Slaying Your Fear on Amazon. Check that out. Start there. Start reading. Start learning everything you can about attachment, because you need to believe. You need to believe that attachment is possible to take your next step, because the next step is going to be fearful. It's going to be terrifying. It's going to be learning to open up and talk to somebody about it. Just one person in your life that you can connect with and say, you know what? I think I have this thing called attachment, but I don't want to have it anymore, and I would like to work with you. Can we work together as a team?
And that will bring with it a cascade of positive change, I can only imagine, speaking from experience of ultimately becoming more honest with myself first and foremost, and then the downstream effects of that as we go.
Wonderful.
So, Adam, thank you very much. Really enjoyed that from a personal point of view and from a academic point of view almost, as I feel there's a lot of things for me to go off and rabbit hole on. So thank you once again, and yeah, speak soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.